2 months ago on this news hour in which we obtained and revealed the entire contents of a secret Republican memo. The gist that blocking the auto bailout was a chance for senators to take a, quote, first shot against unions for backing Democrats. 2 months later, the entire U.S. economy needs the bailout, the un- and underemployed, the middle class, and colors blue and white. So in our fourth story tonight, should it surprise anybody that Republicans are again trying to hurt those who back Democrats, namely the country itself? Tonight, by 61 to 36, the Senate closing debate on that $829 billion economic stimulus package, sending it to the full vote and signaling support for its passage tomorrow noon. Only 3 Republicans voted for it. Only 2 had to. Senator Tom Coburn saying the stimulus, quote, doesn't have to be done today because it's not as if millions of Americans don't know whether they'll have work tomorrow. Yesterday, Senator McCain explained why Republicans are so opposed, even though conservative business groups like the U.S. Chamber of Commerce support this stimulus.
They will come up with a bill, but unfortunately Republicans will not be involved in those negotiations, and I regret that. And in interest of full disclosure, that's the way the Bush administration, when we Republicans were in charge, that's the way we did business. But I thought we were going to have change.
Senator Lindsey Graham also admitted, quote, who are we to criticize? That didn't stop him from criticizing. He said of Obama, quote, please don't ever estimate your ability to persuade people just because you're a gifted orator. And as to Mr. McCain's complaint, is there any evidence Republicans did participate? Here's the Republican Susan Collins this afternoon.
I want to recognize that regardless of how many Republicans vote for this package today, that many were involved, that several were involved in the deliberations in which we participated.
Well, not real Republicans. With a stimulus backed by economists, big business, and even some semi-Republicans, why would the party itself oppose it? Because opposing the president, regardless of country, appeals to the GOP base. RNC Chair Michael Steele to the House members who all opposed it, quote, the goose egg that you laid on the president's desk was just beautiful. Let's bring in Chris Hayes, the Washington editor of The Nation magazine. Thanks for your time tonight, Chris.
Thank you, Keith.
Pete Sessions last week, the congressman from Texas, made repeated comparisons between the Republicans and the Taliban and the insurgency. And every time he did this, one of his handlers would try to pull him away from the reporters to whom he made this remark, and he would run back and make them again. It looked like he was making remarks they were angry about because of the unfortunate analogies. Were they in fact pulling him back because he was exactly describing what the Republicans are trying to do here?
Well, it's a tremendously apt metaphor in this way. The Taliban are very gifted insurgents, but you do not want them running the country. and in that respect, it's really true. I mean, look, the skill set politically demanded by eternal opposition, by undermining the party in power, by opposing and saying no, is a very different skill set than the skill set required to govern. And what we've seen over the last 8 years is that the GOP really doesn't have the skill set to govern. So this is something they're much, much better at, and I would even say far more comfortable in doing than actually running the country is playing this sort of obstructionist role.
Yeah, but who wins this? Because you've got people like Senator Collins saying what she said. Or look, we've had some input into this, and thank you for letting us have input when we're not the majority anymore. You have the Florida GOP chair told the Washington Post that House Republicans are talking too much about opposing and not about how they're going to solve these issues. How far can you ride knee-jerk no's instead of no, but, however, here's the alternative?
Well, I don't know. I mean, a lot of it depends on how the country actually does. And in some respects, the sort of short-term tactical discussion in Washington and in the press about is he being sufficiently bipartisan? Is he locking out the Republicans? Is there change in terms of the tenor of Washington? All of that is going to be dwarfed by the political impact of how the economy turns out in the next few years. I think the Republicans have one plan right now. Plan A is oppose everything the president does and hope the economy continues to tank and then run in 2 years on I told you so. But there is no plan B as far as I can tell. If the economy does get better, if people feel like the steps taken by the Obama administration, congressional Democrats, and a few Republicans have ameliorated the sort of intense misery that's looming on the horizon, then I think, nothing the Republicans say is going to help them very much 2 years from now.
But isn't this exactly the mirror image of what we've heard from the Republicans for 8 years, particularly the 6 years until the 2006 midterms, about Democratic opposition to the war in Iraq? They were somehow, the Democrats were rooting against America. It seems the this is much more clearly defined. The Republicans, to succeed politically, have to have a Great Depression.
That's about right. I mean, it should be noted out of fairness that when the roles of the parties switch, the kind of the formal architecture of the arguments tends to switch in both directions. And so when Republicans were saying that, you know, Democrats want the U.S. to fail, you know, in Iraq, that was untrue. What Democrats wanted was they wanted the U.S. to withdraw from Iraq because they fundamentally thought it was a misguided thing to begin with. There are a lot of Republicans, I think, who really think this is misguided. This is a terrible idea. And Obama the president spoke to that this evening when he said, look, there are people who sincerely believe we should essentially do nothing. And I think that's a large percentage of the Republican caucus. And I don't even want to sort of get into whether this is being done in good or bad faith. But at the end of the day, the policy itself they're recommending is terrible, terrible policy.
Yes, whether you want the Great Depression or simply think that's going to happen, one way or the other, your vested interest is that that's the outcome. Otherwise, politically, you're up the creek without a paddle or a creek. Chris Hayes of The Nation, as always, thanks, especially for staying late with us tonight.
Thank you, Keith.
Media Day.